Good evening, folks. Welcome back to Ask the GM, and I'm Dan Pike, the General Manager for Sudden Valley, and looking forward to once again hearing what issues are on your minds and providing answers as best I'm able. So with that, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I want to leave time for you guys to ask questions and to hear responses to them. So let's go ahead and get forward.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we do have the Q&A section open as well. So if you'd rather type your question, you can use the Q&A feature in Zoom and we'll pose the question to Dan. But we've got 11 people so far that are coming into the meeting here. And so if anybody would like to jump in and ask Dan a question, just use raised hand in Zoom. And I do have one person here, Edna. I'm going to go ahead and bring you on over and you can unmute when you're ready.
So you must have had quite a first week as general manager here.
I did indeed.
So we're new to Sudden Valley, came in September, and it's also quite a time for us. I guess, how are Sudden Valley's emergency weather plans?
So that's a really broad question. I guess I would say, I think that there's a number of things that we do to deal with weather. First of all, we always pay attention, and I will tell you that having experienced Sudden Valley showing us the best or worst, or however you want to characterize it, it can give, was impressive. When I came on December 27th, in the middle of the most major event we'd had in quite a few years. And so we have 5 snow plows. We have a 6th that might be usable in certain circumstances, but it's pretty old. And then we have some contracted folks that work with us to provide some plowing as well. Generally, that's worked pretty well. It was very challenging during that event just because of the quantity and the duration of snow. Usually we don't get that much snow, and we certainly don't usually have snow that lasts that long. And so, that's been a learning experience for us, and we've been doing some debriefing, and we'll continue to do that and thinking about that as we go into training for next year and getting supplies and things like that lined up for next year. So I think it could always go better. I think given everything that was going on, I feel pretty good about where we ended up. I would also say there's a number of other things that have been happening. So, as folks that have been here since before November 14th are aware, we had a multi-century flood. I'm not sure how many hundreds of years it was ended up being characterized, that started November 14th. It wasn't just us. In fact, I guess we can consider ourselves fortunate that we're not in the former bed of Lake Sumas, which became a lake once again up by the Canadian border. But we did have some very real impacts from that, some of which are continuing. So, for example, for the folks that live along Southern Court, they're very aware of that, because we have Southern Court is actually in the midst of a very slow, long-term slide that started from that event and has now made that road impassable, and would be dangerous to let folks drive on. And we can't fix it till it finishes sliding, till the slide is done. So that's going to happen. It could happen the next major rain event. We thought it was going to happen a couple of weeks ago when it was first became really severe. And it didn't, because it stopped raining a little bit sooner than they'd forecast. And so that allowed some of the slide to dry out enough that it slows it down. It's not going to stop it. So we have to deal with things like that. We're obviously always monitoring issues like that, but we're entering into a time when there's going to be greater variance in the weather because of climate change. That means that we have to pay attention to a lot of things, including, what's happening throughout Sudden Valley with roads and other areas. And also then the other thing that comes with all of these is greater amounts of debris that are falling onto our roadways and into your yards and the like, and they end up in our culverts and our ditches. And those are things that cause problems for individual homeowners and also for the association. So one of the things I want to let people know about is we're going to be starting next week. We should have a schedule set, but we're going to have a clean green event that'll be open every other weekend, probably just one day, probably Saturday, but we haven't quite figured out the scheduling yet. But that's going to start within the next couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and then just continue through the spring for sure. And then we'll see if we need it after that. So that folks can get debris out of their yards, which I know a lot of you want to do anyway, but it also helps us as a community have our ditches and culverts and swales work better, and also be less prone to flooding both your yards and the roads that all of us share.
I'm not sure if anybody else has a question or not. There's two of us here. It's Kathy and Edna. But does anyone else have a question? But because I have one too.
But I think you can go ahead with with the next question, then
Okay.
we'll move on. to
Okay,
the-
one of my concerns is that because Sun Valley is so dark, two things. One is some type of lighting, even if it's a reflector, especially around the roads that are they have this sheer drop off. Something so to let you know that, hey, danger is coming. Preferably, I would love to have some type of barrier, but I know that might be prohibitively expensive. So some type of reflector, or some type of lighting to let people know that there's like a curve in the road or a sheer drop off coming.
Sure. So a couple things. One is I was a transportation planner in for a major part of my career. So some things are counterintuitive. I'm not sure that reflectors are a bad idea, so they may be a good idea. Curbs would be, as you said, prohibitively expensive. But one of the things that actually makes roads safer is not clearly delineating the boundaries so that people slow down a little bit, so because they don't want to have an accident. And but I am, I certainly understand. I mean, I drive on the Sudden Valley roads all the time as well. And certainly the interior roads, particularly at twilight or after dark, it can be a little unnerving, especially if you're not used to it. But even if you are, I've driven on them for a long time, and it makes me slow down. I will say, but I'll certainly look into what reflectors, what those might look like, and how things like that might help or not help, because it's like I'm sort of intimating, it's a little bit complicated, but I think certainly safety is something we all want to pay attention to. So I'll check into a little bit more.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Sudden Valley.
Beautiful place to live.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. I'll go ahead and return you to the attendees. And we have Rob with his hand raised. I'll go ahead and bring bring Rob on over, and you can unmute when you're ready.
Oh, good evening, Dan. How are you doing? My name is Rob Gibbs.
Hi, Rob. I'm doing fine. Were you any relation to Robert Gibb? Oh, you said Gibbs, so it's not
Gibbs.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert Gibbs. I'd like to share with you a little bit of an observation and a question, if I could.
Sure.
So my family moved here to Sudden Valley from South Seattle almost 5 years ago. And one of the things that struck me was when I got here was there was just so many wonderful employees that were here to help us get our move. We needed some help with where to put the storage container, things like that. And as time went on, just interactions across all gamuts of the organization. And what I observed is that there has been a large influx of employees that have decided to leave. And I think here my question is what are you planning to do as the leader to help employees see their place in the organization, a career path in it? Just trying to, there's a concern. I think some of my neighbors and I have a concern about losing really skilled people for whatever reason. And maybe if you're looking into that and how you might help them see a future here?
Sure. Well, I think that's a good line of inquiry. So, and I know I've talked with board members, and it kind of, these things go in fits and spurts. So there are periods where we have more and periods where we have less turnover, and things happen for a variety of reasons. One thing that we know is nationally, they're calling this sort of COVID era, especially the latter part, is the Great Resignation, because a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about where they want to be. They're moving home to be closer, moving to places where they've got more family, things like that, or they're just rethinking what they want to do. And so I think all of those are laudable things. As you say, I think one of the things that is important to keeping people is helping them understand what opportunities they will have in an organization. And so one of the things that's happened with Sudden Valley recently is the workforce became unionized. And I see that as a plus for retaining people, because it gives people some sort of sense of, if they stay here, they know that they've got benefits, they know they've got vacation and retirement and insurance and all of those things. And those aren't things that can just come and go, but they're actually secured. And in addition, that if you stay and if you're doing a decent job, you'll move up through seniority, if through no other means. But what I'd also say is that I think it is important for us to think about how we give people an opportunity to see that there are opportunities for them in the organization as they gain more skills, as they get more education, as they do their jobs and become more proficient at it. So one of the things that the current board has stressed to me that they want to see is they want to see succession planning. And what succession planning is, that there's sort of two facets of that are important. One aspect is you want to make sure that you're not left rudderless if somebody decided to leave, or if they got in an accident, or just things happen. And so in an organization of our size, at some point there's going to be people leaving for a variety of reasons. We want to make sure that we've got folks up and down the line that are getting groomed to step in, both on an interim basis and potentially for a longer term basis. So by doing that, there's a couple things. One is it's better for the organization in the moment. When there's a crisis, it's not so much of a crisis, because, for example, if I became incapacitated, one of the things we're working on getting is hiring an assistant general manager who at some point hopefully will take my job. I will choose to retire, and that person will at that point have had the opportunity to gain the skills to step into my position. We want to do the same thing with Brian Krulak over in golf, and with Joel Heverling in finance. We want to do that throughout the organization, and to the extent possible, we want to do that by hiring people or promoting people into those positions that are just under the director or manager positions, so that people see there's opportunities to move up, and so that people familiar with all the processes and the like that we're putting in place are familiar with those already. So from the outside, and for most employees, it will feel seamless when there is a transition. So those are all, so I think that was a really great question. I think those are things that certainly should be attended to. Again, this is a society where there is a lot of mobility. And so people make choices sometimes to go back to get an education, or, as I said, to move closer to family, or they fall in love and they move to be with the person they're partnered with, or whatever. All of those are valid reasons for people to leave. But as you say, giving people reasons to stay is important. And I think that we're working on that, and we'll continue to work on that. And I think we're making some progress in terms of getting some additional stability in terms of some of the positions in management. Getting those filled is going to help provide additional reasons for people to stay.
That's great. Have you had the opportunity to sit down and talk to all the employees in the organization?
Well, I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk to all of them, but for example, tomorrow I've got a meeting at 1:00, basically like this, with all the turf care folks and with some of the parks and rec folks. And I'm going around and doing that with all the employees, so that everyone gets a chance just to have a candid conversation about whatever's on their mind, whatever they're concerned about. They can tell me things that it's good for me to know. So it's really great opportunity for me to understand sort of what things look like at the line level or at management levels, in different areas, as well as for them to hear from me, what I'm thinking. I like to think that when people have a conversation with me, they come away thinking that even if they thought I wasn't thinking, that I was at least thinking, even if I'm thinking wrongly. And hopefully I get some ideas from them about how to understand things better. So that's part of what my plan and what I put into effect here, similar to what I did when I was in Bellingham and other places.
And just, I know I'm taking up a bit of time, but just one last question. In terms of your, with the homeowners and neighbors, do you have a fairly open door policy for us to just come in and have a cup of coffee with you and have some dialogue?
So for the most part, for now at least, because there's been a lot of demand to try to see me, and there's a lot of other things that are on my plate. So I'm using this, at least for now, as a forum to reach out to me. You can also reach out to me through email is a good way. And then there's also, I have to say, there's been some people reaching out about specific issues where they have some concerns about things that have happened, for example, through the flooding, that we're actually having to do some consultation with attorneys because there are situations where people feel like the association is responsible, and what we're understanding is it isn't, but we want to get clarity on that from attorneys. So in situations where there's some legal questions involved, the attorneys prefer that before we get into casual conversations with folks where we may say things that either through lack of my own complete understanding of the law or the situation, or because communication is imperfect, unfortunately, and so people don't necessarily understand precisely what I'm trying to convey. And so they think that they heard myself or someone else indicate, for example, liability of the association when that wasn't what I intended. And mistakes like that can be really expensive to all the homeowners. If we end up going to court and the court says, well, you said things that were inappropriate, but now the homeowners association is on the hook. So it's a little bit complicated, but I do enjoy talking to folks. I'm certainly enjoying the exchanges like I'm having here. And, as things settle down a little bit, I expect in the coming months, I'll have more opportunity to sit down and have coffee with folks, because I do enjoy doing that.
Well, I look forward to maybe getting you out of the office a little early and taking you out for a boat ride out on the lake. That might be fun. So,
okay.
Yeah, I don't usually like to come into somebody's office and gripe. It's usually just to talk about how things are going and whatnot. It's never why haven't you got my road sanded yet? It's not usually like that. So
yeah,
nice chatting with you, Dan. Hope to do it more so in the future with you. Thanks,
you, Rob. Appreciate it as well.
Thanks, Rob. Good to hear from you. I'll go ahead and move you back here.
You as well, John. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, and we do have a question that came up in chat. We've got one person waiting here, but this is a follow-up from the earlier question about the weather plan. IMA here is concerned about the increasing risk of wildfires in Sudden Valley, and how they can prepare for this so they can survive and thrive in Sudden Valley. I think that kind of ties into Clean Green a little bit.
It does. It ties into a number of things. So certainly we're aware that with increased variance in climate, so that means not just temperature variance, but also drought or rain variance. There are some additional risks. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is to get some meetings with the fire chief and the fire department to talk about, maybe having some practicums, some like short courses on what individual homeowners can do to clear debris from around their homes. Because that's one of the most effective things that's been used in drought prone areas to reduce the individual homeowner risk, and then also by doing so reduce the collective risk. But then we also want to look at other things such as, how do we prepare as an association, as a community, for evacuation of some of these areas in the event of a wildfire or something. So those are all things that we are looking into. They're very complicated. It is challenging, but I think like a lot of things, some important work starts at home. And so I would encourage folks to think about that, take advantage of the clean green opportunities we're going to have and clear out, woody debris that's just sitting around your yards that's not doing anything except providing tinder at some point.
All right. Well, I will bring Leslie over. She's got her hand raised here. And Leslie, you can unmute and ask Dan your question.
Okay, thank you. Dan, you did mention that you're going to bring on an assistant GM. And I'm just kind of wondering what are the duties, what basically is the job description for this position, and what qualifications are you looking for in somebody to fill that position?
Sure. So partly it depends on what the applicant pool looks like, sort of how we would distribute responsibilities, but sort of generally what I'm looking for, what I'm hoping to find is somebody that's sort of like a public works director or has experience as an assistant public works director, but that is also good at working with people. So I don't know, I've worked with engineers most of my life. I've got two brothers that are engineers. Some engineers are better with people and some are not. And so I would like to get somebody that's good with people.
I understand that, yes.
Basically work as an operations manager and then take on other functions, according to, again, this kind of goes back to Mr. Gibbs' remarks earlier about helping people feel like they want to stay. So finding things that some people have different passions. So if somebody wants to really take on some issues around human resources or around, some additional working with the maintenance folks and getting that organized a little bit more productively or whatever, I'll certainly take that into consideration as well. Or if they want to work on watershed issues, because there's a lot of committees that I'm going to be attending that, maybe if they really want to go to, for example, the Whatcom Council of Governments meetings or the Lake Whatcom Water and Sewer District meetings, we might have some of those things assigned to them as well. But really it's to work in a complementary manner with me, and to make sure that we're covering things robustly, and probably to be most particularly operations manager for the organization.
Yeah, and on this position, who's going to hire this person, and do they report to you or do they report to the board?
No, they would report to me, and so, and it'll be, I'm sure the board will be involved in the hiring, as they are in a lot of senior hirings. But ultimately, the board is in a transition process right now with me, where, because I came in and it was in the middle of some major snow events, and the board, half the board had been, or four members of the board had been designated to be the general manager for a period of time. And so we're working through a handoff process that's progressing pretty nicely. So I expect, sometime in the next month or so, we'll be most of the way, if not all the way through that. And at that point, folks like the assistant GM would be reporting to me. And I don't think that hire is going to happen before that process is completed. But I also will say that, one of the things that I believe is I'm kind of looking at the board as kind of like what I looked at the City Council of Bellingham as, slightly different, in that the board actually has authority over me, whereas the council, it was much less direct authority, although they had authority over the budget, which in the end works out to be the same thing if they use it wisely. But I make it clear to council members in the past and to board members now that I have no problem if they go and especially talk to director level folks. If they're talking to line folks and giving them direction, then that becomes a little bit more problematic long term, because it's really hard for somebody that is working as a maintenance worker or staffing a front desk or something, to get sometimes contradictory orders from different people, which is what's going to happen if too many people are doing that. But that's not happening right now, and I don't expect that'll be a problem, particularly down the line as we complete all the handoffs.
Yeah, I know the understanding in the past, when I was on the board, was that the general manager dealt directly with the president of the association, and not even any of the other board members were able to give him direction. They all had to go through the president.
So, and well, and I think that that's actually how it's going to end up being here. But I will also say that I like communicating with board members because each one of them was elected by a constituency, and I want to make sure that if they have concerns, they can share them with me. And one of the nice things about getting to a certain age is that you will push back if you think people are being inappropriate. So I certainly am at that point.
Yes.
And
Yeah, no, communication is fine. It's just giving direction from too many people is just counterproductive.
right, and I'm not experiencing that now, and I certainly don't expect to be experiencing that down the line.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
but thank you.
All right. Thanks, Leslie. All right. We have an open queue here. So 14 attendees. If anybody would like to jump in, you can go straight to the front of the line, or we do have the Q&A feature open in Zoom. So if you'd prefer to ask a question over text, you can just type it into that part of Zoom, and we'll ask your question here to Dan. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to jump in here. Oh, actually, Leslie's back. Let me go ahead and bring Leslie back on over.
Okay, just a quick question. Have you
Sure.
driven past the rotunda where the mailboxes are in gate 1?
I have.
Okay, as you come down out of there, there's a big tree on the left and it is difficult to see. And there have been a couple of almost accidents for people who didn't see the car. I was wondering if it would be productive to put a let's see, concave mirror down at the bottom so that you could look back and see if anything is coming down that road.
I'll look into that. I hadn't thought about that, but I think mirrors like that can be really effective at times. So I'll check with actually first thing I'll do is I'll check with our arborist and see sort of what his thoughts are about the tree, but also look.
Well, that tree's going to stay. It's huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll look into that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks again, Leslie. All right. So if anybody else would like to jump in, we're back to a open line. And I suppose in the meantime, there's been a lot about fixing this and that. And actually, maybe I'll come back to my question a little bit later since I've got Edna's hand raised here. I'll go ahead and bring you on over. Okay, go ahead and unmute.
Sorry, just wanted to say we're very glad to have you on board.
Oh, thank you.
Hope we don't drive you crazy in the next year or so.
You can't drive somebody where they already are.
All right, thank you so much.
I will just say that, for me, it's been a nice homecoming because I've told some folks before that I raised my kids for 4 years in Sudden Valley, and it was a pretty idyllic place for them to be. We lived over actually adjacent to Beaver Creek off of Gate 13 and had a nice lot and would walk on the trails across the road and then the Stimson Reserve when I was in Sudden Valley when that became public. And so really, really lovely place to be, especially for raising a family, but also I have a lot of friends that golf and I golf on occasion. So you might see me out there one of these days. And it's a lovely golf course. I think Brian's done a great job in kind of bringing it up to a higher standard than it had been prior to his arrival. I don't know, a decade or so ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian's been great.
Yeah.
I've got Carla with her hand raised. I'll go ahead and bring Carla on over and you can unmute when you're ready.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for doing this. I think it's a great opportunity to get to know you. I may have imagined it, but I think in the most recently approved budget, there was an item about repairing the sauna in the barn where the gym is. I don't know what the buildings are, but I'm just wondering did I imagine that? And if not, what's the status of that project?
So I'm going to plead ignorance because I don't even know what the status is. I did not know we had a sauna, but I will talk. I've actually got a conversation scheduled with Brian Krulak tomorrow already. He's temporarily managing the folks over there. So I will ask him and get some sort of answer for you, because I don't know. I know that there was some flooding over there from the big floods in November. So a lot of things were being worked on. I know that we're still looking at, I don't think all the matting has been replaced that got soaked and had to be torn out. So some things are still in a state of repair, or disrepair, however you want to characterize it, of needing repair. So I'll check with Brian and see if it's fixed yet, or if it's not, when we might expect that. Because I believe they're working on getting everything back to the way it was, only maybe a little bit better, because there'll be some newer stuff in there.
Okay, well, just for your information, we actually have two saunas. One is it's co-located with where the library and the small pool is.
Uh-huh.
And that one was operational in the fall. I don't know about now, but the one in the facility where the gym is had
Right.
been out of commission for several years. But
Okay.
I think it was included in the most recent budget. So when you have your conversation with Brian, you have a little background information.
Perfect. That's good. I always like to sound a little bit less ignorant than I might be.
Well, don't do now. You're trusting that I'm not going to make you sound more ignorant, but this may all be just a fantasy of mine. But I don't know why I would make something up like that. But anyway, thank you very much.
No. Well, it sounds plausible to me, so I'm going to pursue it, and we'll hopefully find an answer for you. Thank you for your question.
You bet.
Thank you, Carla. All right, there is a question that's come up in the Q&A about volunteering. How important is it to have community members and organizations volunteering? Many have been pushed away from volunteering, and with the current proposal and 50% cut for budgeted events, it seems it would be important to maintain those relationships in a positive manner.
So, like a lot of things, this is complicated. So there are a lot of, there are restrictions. So there were some things that were being done in the past that, unfortunately, while well-intentioned, were putting us in violation of nonprofit regulations. So we're a nonprofit corporation. So, for example, we can't have our volunteers or our employees under the direct management of somebody that's not of an outside entity that's running an event. So that's one example where I know there's been some apparent issues in the past. I think what we want to work on is making sure that there are opportunities for people that want to do volunteer events to do them, but we just need to make sure that the boundaries are appropriate so that we don't have legal liabilities as an organization. So, if a group wants to do something, we need to make sure that we put rules and practices and sort of bumpers in place to make sure that whatever happens, first of all, the priority, I think, rightfully should be for community sponsored things first. So things that, the association is doing. But then once you get past that, to other things that people in the community want to do. But they have to be done in a manner that eliminates legal liability for the community association, because at the end of the day, my responsibility as a general manager is to make sure that the community is kept whole, is not damaged by things that we allow others to do here. And so I agree. First of all, I think volunteerism is great. And, I think that there's a lot of people that are volunteering for some of the committees and the like as well. I was just amazed at the quality of folks on the, and the experience and the education that folks on the finance committee that I attended yesterday bring to the table. I think it's going to keep Joel on his toes. Although he seemed more than comfortable sharing excruciating minutia of the budget, which I thought was very, I was really glad to see. It's always good if your finance manager knows a lot more than you think he would know about the budget. But in terms of volunteerism, I believe volunteerism is a great thing. We certainly want to encourage people to do to volunteer in various capacities that meet their passions and interests and expertise. But we have to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing it in a manner that doesn't put liability issues on the table for the association as a whole.
All right. And so kind of going back to the earlier, what I was going to ask was, that we've talked about some of the problems and some of the issues with Sudden Valley. What are some of the, and you kind of touched on this a little bit with your reflections as far as raising your family here. What are some of the strengths that you see in Sudden Valley coming into it?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's good to frame things that way, because I think it gets you thinking about all the things that really, I think, unite us in many ways. So I think one of the things that is a strength is there's a pretty good diversity in Sudden Valley. A lot of HOAs are sort of strata, a certain strata of society or even ethnicity, whereas in Sudden Valley we've got a pretty good diversity across the range of our society at large. And I think that's a good thing, because this is just my own personal bias. I think that as a country, we do better when we mix with people that aren't always just like us, so that we can have some discussions and some give and take in a civil manner, and learn from each other. Because I will say that I learn from any conversation that I have. And I like to hope that occasionally I impart learning as well. But I enjoy talking with people. I enjoy learning about what's going on. And I think that there's a real value in Sudden Valley having the diversity of folks that it has, and also the diversity of interests. We've got folks that are here because, they want to golf. And we've got folks that are here because they like the access to mountain biking trails and the like, or just hiking up in the mountains on the, I guess it's the west side of Sudden Valley. We've got folks that are here because they like having access to a marina on a freshwater lake that's a good sized lake with lots of fun stuff to do. And there's people like it because, depending on where you're at and what your situation is, it's a relatively affordable place. And some of the housing not as affordable, but that's one of the strengths, is we have a whole range of folks with different capacities and abilities and educational backgrounds that are all coming together here. And so, like I said, when on the finance committee, seeing the strengths of some of the folks there, I mean, there were some people that had held impressive positions within finance departments of, Fortune 500 companies and the like, that are volunteering, and folks that did startups did finance for startups, and just a whole range of folks that bring a lot of intelligence to the table. And I think will make sure that they'll keep me on my toes, making sure that we're running things in a financially prudent manner. I think Sudden Valley is a place that's also really well situated. You're not in town, but you're close to Bellingham if you want to do things there, and not too far from Seattle or Vancouver if you want to experience a larger city experience. And yet you get to come home to a place where you can see the stars at night without light pollution. It's a pretty wonderful place. So there's lots of positives to find.
Absolutely, lots of positives. Speaking of, Rob Gibbs did kind of chime in here on the chat that there are a number of volunteers waiting to take part in other committees. Volunteerism has been a positive, certainly, like you mentioned, the finance committee last night. So there is another question that's come through Q&A.
Okay.
This is about Beaver Creek.
Yeah.
Dan, so this is from M. Robles.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, my neighbors and I have made numerous attempts to contact you regarding the flooding of Beaver Creek. They'd like to schedule a sit down to discuss the urgency of their situation and would appreciate a response.
Sure. So, and that was actually one of the situations I was talking about, where I can't go into detail. I can tell you that, in that particular situation, and there's a couple others as well, that we're actually in conversations with our attorney about what sort of where the responsibility delineations are, because there's, different folks have different understandings, and I certainly understand the concerns that folks have. I will say that when you have an attorney that gives you advice, you should either take the advice or fire the attorney. And I think we have a very good attorney. So I'm going to follow his advice. And he's not saying to never meet with you, Michael, or with other folks, but he is saying that, he wants to clarify some things for myself and for board members and for other staff that are charged with dealing with some of these matters, to make sure that whenever we share information with homeowners that are in a situation like this, that it reflects the legally accurate information, so that we're not putting the association at risk. We're not taking on issues that are not the association's responsibility, even though I know a lot of these issues are very stressful for individual homeowners. And I'm very empathetic to those situations. Like I said, I used to live on Beaver Creek. I certainly understand when it is roaring, how it can take chunks out of people's yards and things. And I understand that's happened in some situations from the November flooding forward. And so, I'm certainly looking forward to being able to give you more information in the next week or two. But right now I can't meet with you until I finish the consultations with the attorney and get some clarity from him in terms of how these things are delineated from our perspectives. One thing I would urge people to do, though, is if they think that there's something that's going on with their property that is not their responsibility, I would urge you to work through your homeowner's insurance, because if your insurance feels that way too, they will bring their attorneys to bear. And it's a lot more comfortable if you're a homeowner and your insurance company is paying for attorneys than if you are. So I would urge you to work through your insurers, see, if it's within your property, and depending on the situation, hopefully they will provide coverage. And if they decide they can't because it's not within their situation, or that the community association is liable or whatever, they'll take the lead for you on that. So I would encourage you to reach out, work with your insurers, and see what you can do working from that angle, which is frequently the most productive approach with these situations, if there is in fact, whether there's internal or external liability, whether liability is on the homeowners or whether it's on the association, or it's some mix of the two.
All right, thank you, Dan. We have 16 attendees and no hands raised currently. So if anybody wants to jump in, this will get you straight to the front of the line. And while we're waiting there, I can ask another question, I suppose. There's being up in administration, I see it on a pretty regular basis where people are coming in and they're taking a peek over at El Agave, and you can see they're wondering what's going on back there. Do we have any updates on the repairs in the kitchen and El Agave?
Sure. So we've got some updates. Probably not wholly satisfactory to anybody, because of course the whole situation has been a little bit challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that the 19th hole is open, and they're serving dinner, I think, until 8 p.m. most nights now. So they're open and working downstairs. The upstairs is still being repaired. There was significant damage done there. And we haven't even actually, the remediation is still winding down. So once that's completed, then we can actually go out and we'll bid for the repairs to bring it back up to standards, so that El Agave, the Cruz and his family can move back upstairs and offer service again up there. But we're not at that point yet. I wish I had a date certain that I could offer. I'm hoping within a couple months, but I really don't know. But besides the challenges of getting through the remediation, which has been more challenging than I think any of us had thought or hoped, there's also the challenge of this is a really tough environment for people to get to find folks to do construction. So we're going to have to find people to do construction at a time when, every firm that I know that does construction of, residential remodeling or commercial buildings or building brand new homes, they're all overbooked. And not only are they overbooked, but the supply chain is somewhat damaged. And so people are saying, like, for example, we were working on a project and we were told that, if we wanted to get metal, we better order it now because then we might get it in 5 or 6 months, for steel rods for some construction. So those are the sorts of things. And then you're faced with, okay, so what do we do? Do we go with, there's different, you can go with wood structures or wood things, or you can go with steel, or you can do some concrete preformed stuff or whatever. There's all sorts of approaches, but all of them are overburdened right now. And so I don't have, I wish I could say, yeah, in 3 weeks and 27 hours, we should be open and celebrating. But I don't know how long it's going to take to, as I said, to get the bids out and then back in, and then how long after that before we can actually get the construction completed so that we can reopen upstairs, which I know a lot of people are waiting for. But it is open downstairs, so that's some progress.
Yeah, that's some good news there. Yep.
Something else I thought I'd talk about, and this is just to throw it out to folks, because I haven't really gotten a pulse of what people here think. But when I was mayor, one of the things I worked on was sustainability efforts. And so I was just, I just want to let you know that that's something that is an ongoing issue of mine, something that I pay attention to. I blame my kids, but I think that I think there may be opportunities. And I know that sanitary service offers recycling at homes. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. So if you've got some interest along those lines, or you see some things that might be good for us to consider doing along those lines, I'd love to hear it, just so we can think about it. Because this is, I don't have anything specific planned right now. I just know that that's one of the areas that I want to try to help us as an association move towards, because I think that, we're living in the watershed. We're living in a time when environmental issues are rising to the forefront for many of us. And, as a community, it's again, one of those things that I think if it's done well, it could unite us in trying to have a purpose in terms of making us less impactful on the environment that we are living in.
All right. Got a couple more people who've joined us. So if you'd like to jump in and ask Dan a question, down at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, you should be able to use the raise hand feature there, and that will indicate to us that you're looking to ask a question. We'll bring you over. Or you can use Q&A, which also should be at the bottom. If you're on a mobile device, there's usually a little 3-dot menu you tap, and it should have those features there. But Q&A will let you type in a question instead, and we can just ask Dan that way if you prefer. Well, oh, Rob's back. Rob's got his hand raised. I'll go ahead and bring him on over. There you go, Rob. Go ahead and unmute.
Thank you for taking another question, Dan.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you could take a look at ADA access in our facilities. Some of our doors are a little difficult to roll through if you're in a chair. Some of the, like down at the Marina Park, to get into that bathroom there's some gravel that you need to travel over, and then the door, you got to make a real hard right hand turn. So some of those doors are a little difficult in our facilities. I know Michelle's working on trying to get access up onto the launch ramp dock itself here before the season begins. But that was also something I was kind of thinking maybe I could come and just talk with you about. But I think it'd be good for us to look at ADA access because a lot of our structures were built maybe prior to the law.
Mhm.
I think we need to get current.
So I think that's a great thought to, and it's good to pay attention to these things. So the way it works in most municipalities is, so the bad news is ADA access is really expensive to provide. And so the federal government, when they passed the law, said you can leave things the way they are, except for when you do improvements. But I do think that, things like, the bathroom down by the marina, if it's predominantly a matter of putting a pad down and we're doing some work in the area, then I think we should, as part of that, look and see, is that something we can manage to do as part of work that we're doing if we've got work going on. So, and I think looking at that, I'm just using that as an illustrative example. I think as we look around at different areas where we're doing work, it is a good idea to look and see, because we're all aging. And so if we do it as opportunities arise to incorporate it into construction or into projects we're already planning to do, it's a lot less expensive than if we go out and we say, okay, we're going to make the entire community ADA accessible. And that means, 150 different projects of putting in a door that has a button and, that will open and shut for folks that can't handle the door or trying to pass through in a wheelchair, and put in a ramp that works for them, versus doing it piecemeal, but piecemeal in terms of doing it in a coherent manner where we identify upcoming projects and then we look and see, okay, is there some way to incorporate some ADA accessibility features into that project? Even though it'll cost a little bit more in that project, over time, it gets us to a place where as a community, we probably want to be, which is where people do have access regardless of their mobility or mobility challenges.
Sure. And I'm not saying we need to eat the whole elephant at one time.
No, and you weren't. I was just trying to explain to people sort of how it works. This is generally how it works in most cities, for example. And I think it's a pretty rational approach. And then as we have opportunities, there might be some places where it's really important. Like, for example, if we do have ADA access into the administration offices, but if we didn't, I would say that that's something that we probably should fix, because I think that everyone ought to be able to come down and get into the office and talk to people or whatever. So, we could look for specific examples, and the pools might be another example where we should have ADA access. If we don't, like especially the ones that are more likely to be used for therapeutic purposes by folks that might be more likely to have some challenges that would put them in the ADA category.
Yeah, we do have ADA lifts in our pools, which is great.
Right.
Sometimes the battery dies on the quiet pool. So,
Right.
But I think that to get into a bathroom is important, and I think
Yep.
I have a boat that I can use, but no way to get onto the dock once it's launched. So I think that I'm advocating for people in chairs to be able to get on the water. So I think that's something we definitely need to do before May.
Well, I think that certainly sounds like something worth looking into and seeing if there's a way to affect that. I'm not gonna. I try to not make any promises until I look more deeply into it, because I hate to, as much as I would hate to say we can't do it, I'd rather, not say up front that we can and then find out down the line that for whatever reason we can't do it this year. So, I think that's a great a target, and I think I'll certainly commit to looking into it and seeing what we can do to make that happen. And I'll talk to Brian and Michelle and see what's going on there regarding that. But I appreciate you for bringing that forward. There was a person that I met many years ago who when I was working as a transportation planner, who said that if you build a community so it works for the very young and very old, it works for everybody. And I think that's a great goal to have. So.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I have a spinal cord injury, but to tell you what, you'll probably see me rolling around the neighborhood,
Well, that's
because
great.
I'm living life, and I'm never giving up, but I do need some help. So I'm advocating for people with disability here, and I'm going to be a little bit selfish and also advocate for me too.
No, self-interest there's nothing wrong with some enlightened self-interest. So
Thank you, Dan.
thank you, Rob.
All right, thanks, Rob. There is, so we got about 5 minutes left here. There is a question that came in over Q&A. And this is also about some flooding along Jubilee Lane. Or do you want me to, we can go over this one here perhaps?
Sure. It may be similar to the last flooding issue, but
I believe so. It's reminiscent of some of the stuff that was happening in the community center, actually, when the flooding was really raging there.
right.
So this is from Elton. I'm the homeowner of 6 Jubilee Lane. My garage was flooded in November as the rainwater pouring down from the street and homes on upper hills due to the poor drainage along Jubilee Lane. I had contacted the association, but had not heard anything back in a few months. Temporary ditch made by the HOA near our house did help a little, but I'm hoping for some permanent solutions to improve the drainage along Jubilee Lane.
So not being familiar with that specific location, I don't want to speak about that, but I will say that overall we're looking at a more robust program to work on our culverts and swales and catch basins in a more coherent manner. So part of what I found when I came in was that there had been plans, but actually the crew that was working on those efforts was working on things kind of in an ad hoc manner. And so I think, it wasn't that they weren't working hard, but they weren't really, I don't think, being as effective as we would have liked them to be. So we're hoping that bringing in a new manager and having some additional staff hired to help with that, and doing so in a thoughtful, coherent manner will really help address not just the issue of this particular individual, but some of the issues that have arisen community-wide. And again, I think overall the ditches and swales are working pretty well, but they do need attention. And like I said, please, if you have debris in your yard, think about bringing it down to the clean green when we get that scheduled. And again, that'll be scheduled in the next week or so. We'll have a schedule out for it. I'm not saying it's going to happen next week or so. It's going to be a little further out than that. But when we get that going, please consider bringing down, your woody debris and the like, so that it is not going into our culverts, because that's really the source of a lot of these issues. Notwithstanding the fact that a lot of the issues in November were issues that would have happened to some degree, no matter what. I mean, if you want to, the positive spin is it exposed some weaknesses in some of our roads and culvert areas. So we're fixing those now. And we're also requiring a little bit more robust attention by some of the folks, like some of the utilities that have been coming out here and being less than attentive in how they've finish off the work. They go in and they disturb things, but they don't necessarily leave it as it was before they came. And so we've talked to some of them, and they're paying more attention on these issues, and hopefully that will help as well. So all of us working together, including the folks that work in our community, for their employers, providing utilities and things like that, as well as individuals taking care of their yards and getting the yard debris and the like down to the clean green area. Will be helpful for all of us, but I don't have specific knowledge of what Elton's talking about, but I'll look into it just to make sure that because we have had some areas that were more severe, and we are working more diligently on getting those done sooner rather than later. So I'll make sure that's on that list if there's some stuff that needs to be done soon.
And I know we're right up against it. We had one last question that came in, and it might be pertinent to this whole conversation. Did the association apply for any FEMA assistance?
So the problem is we are not an incorporated municipality. We are a private nonprofit association. And so I'm still trying to see if there's some angles we can work through to find some funding. I talked to the county executive. He was sympathetic and was trying to help with that. So far, we have not identified anything. But again, we've got some significant issues that that in any other community would be FEMA eligible, most particularly the slide on Southern Court. So we're continuing to work on that, but at this point, we don't have any, concretely identified FEMA funds available. And I know that some of so I don't know if homeowners are individually eligible if you're in an association like this or not, but that might be worth pursuing, and I'll try to look into that as well, just to see if there's things that individual homeowners might be able to do if you've been damaged to an extent where you have FEMA eligibility. Because I know that FEMA will, in some situations, help homeowners, and they've helped. I know we've had the appropriate declaration in our county for homeowners to get help. And I was just speaking from personal experience. I was living in a house that in 2001, I think it was, whenever the Nisqually quake hit, I was living in Tacoma. And I had a stucco house with a brick chimney that received significant damage from that earthquake. And FEMA, they didn't fully cover the cost, but they gave me several $1,000s to help, which did help, because it was really painful regardless, but that at least helped sort of kickstart things a little bit, and it helped. And so I would encourage people to individually reach out to FEMA, because the FEMA folks that worked, I didn't go through any government agency. There was a little note in the paper saying, call this number for FEMA help. And I called them and they helped. So I would say, if you don't know who to call, I would start with your congressional representative. I believe it's Rick Larson in Sudden Valley, because his staff this is the sort of thing that they are really good at, and he really pays attention to. So you might start there and just see if there's some sort of help you can get from him, because I think there's another 3 weeks or so that you have to get the paperwork going. So I just want to throw that out there so that folks get on it if they think they might be eligible, because it was very helpful. And it wasn't really a lot of paperwork when I did it. I'm not saying where it's at now, because it's 20 years later.
All right. Well, it's 8:02. There was one last comment here from Elton, asking whether what you were mentioning, whether that would happen this year, and if you suggest they keep connecting with the working crew.
So there will be. So I'm going to go ahead and look into Jubilee Lane. I'll talk to some folks that are working on sort of some sort of work on culvert and tree and other issues, and see what I can find out. I'm certain some work will happen throughout the community this year, and if there's been a significant issue there, I have to imagine that would be the case on Jubilee. But I don't want to say that without, I don't want to say, yeah, it's going to happen without confirming it with somebody else first. So I'm pretty confident that'll be happening, but I will look into it because I want to verify that I'm being accurate. So, and appreciate bringing that to my attention.
All right. Well, no other questions. Believe that's our hour for tonight. Appreciate the time there, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their evening to share your thoughts with me and to hear the thoughts of your friends and neighbors. And look forward to talking again soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.